He should have never opened the envelope. That was the first thought that crept into Senator John Kennedy's mind as the sleek black limousine pulled up to the entrance of the so-called retreat. The invitation had arrived on thick, semi-transparent paper with no return address, no official seal, just 5 embossed words in gold. "Your light awaits you, John." At first, he thought it was a prank or some overly ambitious spiritual influencer trying to impress him. But something about the weight of the envelope, the cold precision of the typography, the absence of a sinister felt different, haunting even. And now, standing in front of the entrance to a gated compound buried deep in the Colorado Rockies, John felt that strange sensation again, the one you get when your gut knows something your brain refuses to accept. This wasn't about wellness. This was about control. The gate opened without a word. No guards, no security cameras, no staff. Just a woman in flowing white robes waiting barefoot on the gravel path, smiling as if she'd known him for years. "Welcome to the Garden of Lumens," she said softly, as wind chimes echoed in a rhythm too perfect to be real. John hesitated, took one look at the hills behind him, then stepped forward. The path was lined with unnatural flowers, pulsing with a faint blue glow, and birdsong played faintly over hidden speakers. It felt like walking into a dream or a trap beautifully disguised as paradise. The first thing that struck him wasn't the architecture, or the silence, or even the eerie serenity. It was the people. Dozens of them. Influencers, CEOs, cultural tastemakers, all dressed in white, barefoot, silent. Their expressions were calm, almost too calm, like they'd all taken the same pill and left their personalities at the door. And there, standing beneath an artificial willow tree, was Ellen DeGeneres. She wore a silver pendant and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You made it," she said, embracing him as if they were old friends. "You've finally chosen light over noise." Before he could answer, she gestured toward the crowd and whispered, "Everyone here did." The day moved like a strange dream. No phones allowed. Meals served without servers. Conversations happened in whispers. The retreat, if you could call it that, wasn't about meditation or mindfulness. It was about erasure. The rituals were subtle but intentional. People were asked to write down who they used to be on thin parchment, then toss it into a basin of blue flame. Others recited mantras like "loyalty before legacy" and "brightness requires surrender." Kennedy played along, for the moment, but he watched everything, memorized details, the layout of the rooms, the facial expressions of those who smiled too long, too hard. By nightfall, he was escorted to the central chamber, a dome-shaped hall with no windows and a single glowing pool at its center. Ellen stood at its edge, barefoot, her reflection flickering on the water's surface like a candle about to be snuffed. "This," she said, "is the bath of light. Those who enter are never the same again. You step in as a name and leave as legacy." The room darkened, and soft music began to play a low, humming frequency that seemed to vibrate in his chest more than in his ears. People gathered silently, forming a circle around the pool, their heads bowed. Ellen extended her hand. "Are you ready to become something more than just John?" Kennedy looked around. No cameras, no press, no documentation. Just this pool, this pressure, this performance masked as enlightenment. He didn't move. The silence in the room grew heavier, like invisible walls pressing in. Ellen's smile never wavered. "It's only water," she whispered. "But it changes everything." He stepped forward, then stopped. Something inside him, something deeper than instinct, screamed, "No." He turned to the group, stared at every blank face surrounding him, and said, "I'll pass." A sharp inhale rippled through the circle. Ellen's smile finally cracked, but she didn't argue. Instead, she leaned in close and said, "Not everyone gets a second invitation." Later that night, in his guest room overlooking the glowing forest, he found a black stone resting on his pillow. Engraved on its surface were 4 words. "You have been marked." His heart sank. He didn't know what it meant yet, but every cell in his body knew it wasn't good. If you've ever felt like someone was watching you when no one was there, if you've ever said no to something that didn't feel right but couldn't explain why, if you've ever stood in a room full of people pretending everything's fine while your gut screamed otherwise, I need you to like this video and comment the number 9 right now, because things are about to get darker. And the light? The light isn't what it seems. By morning, the garden no longer felt serene. The glow was too perfect, the smiles too rehearsed, the silence too loud. Senator Kennedy awoke to the sound of soft humming not outside, but coming from within the walls. It pulsed like a heartbeat, low and rhythmic. As he sat up, he noticed something chilling. The black stone from the night before was gone, replaced by a folded white card on the nightstand. It read, "Your silence is your admission. No name, no signature, just that." He felt the tension settle into his chest, like a hand pressing down. Downstairs, the atmosphere had changed. People moved in synchronized steps, eyes glassy, all in white. No one acknowledged him. At breakfast, a woman with a 1-million-follower wellness channel sat across from him and said nothing, just stared. Behind her, someone was burning the clothes they'd arrived in. The smoke rose silently, disappearing into an open skylight. This wasn't a retreat, it was a reset. Ellen appeared, radiant and terrifying in her calmness. "John," she said gently, "you still have time. The water waits." He replied with a polite nod, masking the storm inside him. "Why me?" he asked, keeping his voice measured. She smiled. "Because you still think you're separate, but we only rise when we surrender." That afternoon, he was led without warning into a meditation chamber built like a cathedral. Inside, the light was unnatural, glowing upward from the floor in soft pink and gold. At the center stood a pillar holding a single object, a mirror. But this mirror didn't reflect his image. It showed something else, something wrong. The room grew colder. Ellen entered behind him and whispered, "The self you hold onto is what holds you back. Once you let go, the door opens." He turned to face her. "What door?" Ellen circled him slowly. "The one beyond legacy. The place where your name is no longer currency, only your obedience." For the first time, she looked less like a guide and more like a gatekeeper. John stepped back. "You're asking me to erase myself." She smiled again, that same unreadable grin. "Number, I'm offering you eternity." That night, it got worse. The lights in his room wouldn't turn off. The walls hummed louder. When he looked outside, he saw 3 people in white standing motionless in the garden, just staring up at his window. He tried the door. It was unlocked, but outside the hallway was empty and dark. As he stepped out, he noticed tiny black orbs embedded into the ceiling corners. Surveillance. He hadn't noticed them before. Or they hadn't been there. Down the hall, someone was whispering, repeating words over and over again. "He said no. He said no. He said no." He followed the sound to the main dome, where the bath of light sat, still glowing faintly. A figure stood at the edge. It wasn't Ellen. It was the wellness influencer from breakfast, now weeping. Her reflection shimmered across the pool. She turned slowly to him and said, "They never let you leave clean." Then she stepped into the water and vanished beneath the surface. He didn't sleep. At dawn, a knock came. Not a soft, respectful knock. A coded one. Sharp, intentional. He opened the door to find a man early 50s, dressed in hiking clothes, disheveled beard. "You don't know me," the man whispered. "But I said no too. In 2019. My films dried up. My deals died in silence. They erased my name, not my face. You have 3 days before your life doesn't belong to you anymore." "Why are you telling me this?" John asked. "Because someone has to." Before he could ask more, the man slipped a folded paper into his hand and vanished into the stairwell. It was a map, not of the retreat, but of what was beneath it, a layout of underground rooms. One was marked with a black X and a name, the archive. That night, John made his decision. He would go down there. He would see for himself. Because whatever was happening in this so-called garden, whatever lay beneath the bath of light it, wasn't about healing. It was about hiding. And someone, somewhere, needed to shine a light on the people who pretend to sell it. Now ask yourself something. If a place promised you transformation, influence, and eternal relevance, would you step into the water? Or would you walk away and lose everything? Let me know in the comments. And if you're still watching, comment the number 9. Because what's about to be uncovered in that underground chamber will change everything. The door wasn't hidden. That's what unsettled him most. At exactly 2:17 a.m., John Kennedy slipped down the curved marble corridor, guided only by the dim green glow of the emergency exit lights. The others were asleep, at least pretending to be, and the humming sound that had filled the walls since day one had stopped entirely. Silence wasn't comforting. It was surgical, deliberate. The map in his hand, drawn on crinkled old vellum, showed a maintenance door near the southern atrium. No guards, no code. Just a rusted handle that squealed when he opened it. And behind it, stairs. Cold, black metal steps spiraling downward into complete darkness. He descended. The deeper he went, the air changed. What had once smelled like eucalyptus and lavender became old paper, metal, and static. After several minutes, the stairs opened into a hallway made of concrete. Raw. Industrial. The luxury of the garden above was gone. Here, the retreat shed its skin and revealed something far older and far more intentional. There were no signs, just symbols. Circles, crosses, mirrored triangles etched into the walls. John's pulse raced as he followed the map to the room marked with an X. When he reached the end of the hallway, he found a steel vault door, just slightly ajar, and behind it, the archive. Rows of drawers, hundreds, each marked only by a date and a symbol. No names, no labels, just coded order. The room buzzed softly, like it was alive, powered by something unseen. John stepped inside cautiously. The drawers didn't lock. He opened one. Inside, a contract, a microchip in a clear bag, a black stone like the one he'd received, and a photo of a person he recognized. A household name, smiling, half-dressed, standing next to Ellen in the same white robes, holding a crystal pendant up to the light. He opened another drawer. A different face, a different year, same contents, and another, until finally he opened one marked simply JK. His hands trembled. Inside, a blank agreement with his name pre-printed at the bottom, waiting only for a signature. A tiny clear vial labeled Purification. A sealed envelope that said, "Do not open unless fully committed." And a note, handwritten. Some people choose the light. Some are simply placed in it. Suddenly, the humming sound returned, but louder, angrier. John turned toward the door. Ellen was standing there, not smiling. "You weren't supposed to see this," she said softly, stepping into the room, her bare feet making no sound on the cold concrete. "You're not ready." John didn't move. "What is this?" She looked around calmly. "Proof of loyalty, insurance, leverage." He stared at her, furious. "You keep files on people?" "We keep balance," she said, her voice calm but firm. "You think people just rise in this world? That legacy is earned with talent and luck?" She stepped closer. "No, John. Legacy is managed, curated, ritualized." He backed toward the wall. "This isn't about wellness. It's surveillance, control." She tilted her head. "It's belonging. You're blackmailing them." They agreed. They chose the water. You didn't. That's why you'll vanish. Then she stopped, looking over his shoulder. Unless there was another drawer. One John hadn't noticed. It was larger, deeper. On its front, the letter K and a triangle split in two. "You want to know how deep this goes?" Ellen said, her voice nearly trembling now. "Open it." John hesitated, then yanked the drawer out. Inside was a video monitor, a single USB drive, and a letter addressed to him in his own handwriting. He stared in disbelief. He never wrote this. Or had he? His mind raced. Had someone forged it? Was he drugged? Was this all a hallucination? Ellen spoke again, but her voice shook. "You already said yes, years ago. You just don't remember." John's knees weakened. "No," he whispered. She nodded. "You were reborn just like them, but something in you resisted the wash. That's why you feel different. That's why you came back." Suddenly, the humming intensified, and lights flashed. Someone else was coming. Ellen turned to him, panicked now. "They're waking up. You need to go." "I'm not leaving," John said. "Not without this." He grabbed the USB, the envelope, and the photo. Ellen didn't stop him. She simply stepped aside and whispered, "If you open it, the whole world will burn." He looked at her one last time. Maybe it should. He ran. Back up the stairs, breath shallow, heart pounding, hearing footsteps echo behind him. When he burst through the door into the garden, the artificial sun was already rising, and the air smelled like lavender again, as if nothing had happened. But something had. Everything had. Now, the question wasn't whether he would speak, but who would try to stop him first. If you were John, standing in that archive room, holding the proof that could unravel a perfectly curated world, what would you do? Would you expose it or stay silent and safe? Let me know in the comments, and if you haven't already, hit like, And comment the number 9 to let others know the truth matters more than image, because the next chapter is about to break everything wide open. The sun was too bright that morning. It poured down over the Garden of Lumens like a performance spotlight, intentional and artificial. Senator John Kennedy stood near the edge of the compound's stone fountain, the USB drive clenched tightly in his palm like a relic. Everything around him had returned to its curated Perfection Ellen's white-robed followers, sipping herbal tea in silence. Soft chimes dancing in the breeze. Cameras invisible but watching. No one spoke of the night before. No one even looked at him. It was as if he had become a ghost. But something had shifted. He could feel it in the way the staff avoided his gaze. In the way the door to the dome was locked now. In the way the same bird chirp played every 47 seconds, like a broken loop. He wasn't just unwelcome. He was being erased in real time. At breakfast, no food appeared on his plate. The teapot poured nothing. When he tried to speak to another guest and actress, he recognized from a recent Oscar-winning film, she looked through him. "You're not in the schedule," she said softly, before returning to her silent chant, as if that one sentence had deleted him from reality. By noon, his cabin had been stripped. No suitcase, no wallet, no ID. The black stone had returned to the pillow. This time, the engraving had changed. Return to the light or fade. He pocketed it without hesitation. He'd seen enough. John slipped away from the central garden, weaving through the artificial trees and past a pond that no longer reflected anything. He followed the map again. There was a secondary path, a back gate, barely marked. But as he approached, a familiar voice cut through the silence. "You're making a mistake." Ellen stood barefoot in the grass, her arms crossed. She didn't look angry. She looked exhausted. "They'll come for you if you leave with it," she said quietly, nodding at the USB in his pocket. "This isn't just about me or the garden. It's about all of us." "You don't get to say that," John replied, stepping forward. "You don't get to speak for everyone just because they gave you their silence." "I gave them protection," she countered. "The world doesn't reward purity, John. It rewards obedience dressed up as brilliance. This place, this ritual, it helps people survive the system." John's voice dropped. "You turned fear into a business model." She didn't flinch. He started to walk past her when she said something that stopped him cold. "You already lost your next project. They pulled out this morning, quietly, gracefully, like you never existed." He turned to face her, fury building behind his eyes. "And what do you get in return?" he asked. "Influence? Immunity? A name that echoes forever?" She smiled weakly. "I get to be remembered." He walked away. It took him nearly an hour to reach the end of the service road, where a black SUV that wasn't part of the retreat waited exactly where the map's final mark ended. Inside sat the man from earlier, the one who had warned him. "They already know," the man said as John climbed in. "The second you opened that drawer, you started a clock." "I don't care," John replied. "I'm not afraid of being forgotten. I'm afraid of pretending none of it was real." The man handed him an old flip phone and a plane ticket tucked inside a hollowed-out book. "This will get you to a neutral zone, somewhere outside their reach, but after that, you're on your own." John didn't hesitate. He'd spent a lifetime playing by rules. It was time to break them. By the time he reached the city 3 days later, the effects had already begun. His name disappeared from search engines, not scrubbed, but quietly buried under irrelevant results. His personal website redirected to an error page. Several articles citing his work had been edited to remove his quotes entirely. The publisher of his upcoming book had shifted timelines indefinitely. The headshot on his author page had been replaced with a silhouette. But worst of all, no one was calling. People he had mentored, helped, celebrated, all quiet. He checked the USB every day, unsure when to release it. The contents were as disturbing as he remembered recordings, testimonies, contracts, surveillance footage of rituals disguised as therapy sessions. A voice, unmistakably Ellen's guiding initiates through the transference ceremony, where identities were metaphorically drowned in water before being brought into resonance. One clip showed a famous musician standing waist-deep in the bath of light, whispering, "I give it up. I give it all up." Another showed a politician lighting a candle and placing a crystal on their tongue while repeating the phrase, "A race to ascend." John stared at the screen, knowing what it would mean if this went public. But he didn't waver. He knew that legacy wasn't about being remembered. It was about what you refused to forget. And if even one person saw the truth and chose to say nothing, Maybe, just maybe, he hadn't been erased at all. So let me ask you this. If someone offered you a way to never be forgotten, but at the cost of your voice, your name, your truth, would you take it? Would you step into the light? Or walk away in the dark, knowing no one might ever remember you? Leave a comment. Speak your truth. And if you believe silence is no longer protection, if you believe legacy should be earned, not traded, then like this video and comment the number 9. Because the shadows are watching, but so are we. He clicked send. The file uploaded slowly, almost painfully onto a hidden whistleblower server, its blue progress bar crawling like time itself. John Kennedy stared at the screen in a dim, rented motel room off Highway 89, the kind of place where no one asked questions and everything smelled faintly of bleach. The moment the upload hit 100%, something in his chest shifted. Not relief, not fear, something more ancient. Like standing on the edge of a cliff and finally deciding to jump, not because you want to fall, but because you've already spent too long not flying. The file went live at 3:03 a.m. By 3:11, it had 41 views. By 3:17, it had 3,000. And by sunrise, it had broken the internet. The footage wasn't stylized. It wasn't polished. It was raw, real. Shaky camera work and glitchy audio, but that only made it more terrifying. People around the world watched, stunned, as familiar faces stood barefoot in glowing pools, chanted strange phrases, surrendered handwritten scripts into flame, and whispered vows to become resonance. Ellen's voice appeared in nearly every clip. I don't give them fame. I give them freedom from uncertainty. At first, many thought it was a performance art piece, but then the real fallout began. A-list celebrities deleted social media without warning. Influencers released cryptic apology videos before vanishing entirely. One late-night host broke down live on air whispering, "I just wanted to be seen," before cutting to commercial and never returning. A major studio executive was fired after a separate whistleblower linked him to contracts nearly identical to the ones found in the archive. And as for Ellen, she tried to laugh it off. She went on a morning show 2 days later wearing all white, joking that someone's got a vivid imagination and that John Kennedy was always a fan of fiction. But the audience didn't laugh. Something in her eyes betrayed the tremor in her voice. The joke fell flat. The cameras didn't cut away fast enough. And that's when the second video dropped. John had saved it for this moment footage of Ellen in the archive, standing next to the drawer labeled with her own mark, whispering to someone off camera, "Silence is the only kind of loyalty you can't fake." That clip alone shattered the facade. By the end of the day, Number the Garden is Real was trending in 47 countries. Hundreds of former associates, assistants, and quietly buried voices came forward, describing eerily similar patterns. Mysterious retreats, contracts they didn't remember signing, careers that exploded or imploded depending on how deeply they bowed. Suddenly, John Kennedy wasn't a ghost. He was the whistle in the storm. But fame wasn't what he wanted. Recognition wasn't what he needed. He watched the world react from behind blackout curtains and burner phones, knowing full well what came next. At exactly 9 p.m., his motel television turned on by itself. Static at first, then a still image, a crystal pendant turning slowly in midair, and then a sentence, appearing one word at a time in white serif font. "You were warned. Loyalty isn't optional." Then blackness. His breath caught. Not fear but clarity. They wouldn't stop. Not now. Maybe not ever. The next morning, a young woman showed up at his door. She couldn't have been older than 25, trembling, clutching a notebook. Her voice shook. "My sister went," she said. 3 years ago. She changed when she came back. Not all at once. Slowly. Like someone was editing her from the inside. She doesn't laugh the same anymore. She doesn't remember the same. John nodded, motioned for her to sit. "I saw your video," she whispered. "It was the first time I thought I wasn't crazy." He sat with her in silence. For the first time in weeks, he felt grounded not because someone believed him, but because someone needed him. That night, he sent one last message to the public. It was a voice recording unfiltered. No music, no production. Just his voice, steady and raw. "You're going to be told this is a lie, that it's all theater, that no one controls your destiny. But if you've ever wondered why some people rise so fast, why some disappear without a trace, why silence echoes louder than truth, it's not in your head. It's in the garden, and it's spreading. He ended with a line no one expected. I would rather live nameless, forgotten, and invisible than be remembered for what I had to give up to stay in the light. The message played across thousands of platforms, millions watched, and among them, a quiet army began to resonate to worship him, not to protect him, but to protect what he stood for. The right to say no. The right to remain real. Now it's your turn. If you've ever felt that tug in your gut, that whisper telling you something isn't right, even when everything looks perfect on the surface, then don't ignore it. Don't silence it. Share this. Comment your story. And if you're still here, drop the number 9 in the comments so the next person knows they're not alone. Because truth doesn't need to shine. It only needs to survive. They came for him at dawn, not with sirens, not with headlines, not with agents in black suits, but with absence. That was their weapon now. The world didn't erase you loudly. It just stopped remembering. John Kennedy woke to a quiet so thick, it felt like the motel walls were padded. No traffic outside, no wind. The girl who had come the night before was gone. Her chair sat empty, her notebook left behind, every page torn out. The television wouldn't turn on. His burner phone had reset itself to factory default. His name was no longer in his contact list. Even he was gone from his own phone. He stepped outside to find the motel sign flickering erratically, as if trying to warn him in Morse code. The air was colder than it should have been. No birds, no passing cars, just a strange mechanical hum coming from somewhere unseen. The manager, who'd been friendly just yesterday, now refused to make eye contact. "We don't have you checked in," he said flatly. "This room's been vacant all week." John didn't argue. He simply nodded, stepped back inside, and looked at the mirror over the dresser. For a brief moment, there was no reflection, just light, cold, white, and empty. That was when he knew. The ritual had begun. Not the one in the garden, the real one, the one the world performed on people who told the truth. Obliteration by design. He packed what little he had, including the notebook with its pages torn out, and walked to the nearest cafe with Wi-Fi. It didn't matter that he'd exposed them. It didn't matter that millions had watched. The machine had a backup plan. They didn't need to disprove him. They just needed people to move on. But he wasn't done. He sat at a corner booth, ordered nothing, and began writing again, by hand, by memory. This time, not just for himself, but for anyone who'd ever been given that choice. Bathe in the light or vanish in the dark. He published a new letter, not a video, not a tweet, a letter, titled simply, "For Those Who Still Remember Me." In it, he didn't attack Ellen. He didn't even name her. He didn't talk about stones, baths, or whispers in white robes. He told the truth in its simplest form. He wrote about the moment someone offers you everything, but only if you stop being you. He wrote about watching people transform into something perfect on the outside and hollow on the inside. He wrote about silence and the price of breaking it. Within 48 hours, the letter spread further than the video, because this time, it didn't rely on shock. It relied on pain, the quiet kind, the universal kind. People began commenting not with outrage, but with stories. Stories of the job they didn't get because they asked too many questions. Stories of the spotlight they lost because they wouldn't fake the right smile. Stories of being told to sit down, shut up, and shine like everyone else. And then came the last twist. A new user posted a video anonymously. It showed footage never seen before. A younger Ellen, before fame, sitting in a small room, looking into a handheld camera. She looked tired. Her hair was messy. Her voice cracked. "If this ever gets out," she said, "it means I failed. It means I became exactly what I said I wouldn't. But if you're watching, please believe me. We don't need to be icons. We just need to be real." The internet exploded. Suddenly, Ellen wasn't a villain. She was a warning, a symbol of what happens when even the strongest forget who they are. John watched the clip alone, tears pooling in his eye snot out of pity, but out of understanding. Everyone was someone before they were someone. And now? Now people were remembering again. Remembering that legacy isn't built through rituals and contracts and curated perfection. It's built by choices, by the quiet courage to say no, by the willingness to be misunderstood, by the refusal to bathe in someone else's idea of light. So if you're still here, still listening, I want to ask you one final time. Have you ever walked away from something that promised everything but would have cost you yourself? If you have, write it below. Comment your truth. And if you don't have the words, just write the number 9. That's enough. That means you're still here. You're still whole. And maybe, just maybe, that's how the real legacy begins.